I was like, okay. All right, welcome to our Friday Flex. This is your host, Keith and Joseph. We're flexing.
I'm greasing up, y'all.
And we're greasing.
Look at these hands.
We're greasing and flexing.
Look at these hands.
You see these well moisturized. The cold won't ash us today.
No.
So today we are going to talk about for me, a fun topic. It is the nature of the mind. So this will be may be a 5 to even 7 part series. It is the topic is mind control and how the mind affects us, and how in some cultures it is even given characteristic qualities and even its own almost given like a personality. And so I was thinking about this song back in the early 90s, and I believe it was by Scarface, called My Mind Is Playing Tricks on Me. And in the video, Scarface is talking about the kind of games that the mind plays. And I wanted to see if I can
Staying moisturized, y'all.
stay moisturized. We won't tell you how much was used to moisturize.
Actually, I used about a third of it. You got to get into those nooks and crannies,
So in the video, different ways the mind is seen is being rapped about or being spoken about in a very poetic way, actually. And so I was just looking up the Oxford definition of the mind.
Oxford.
The element of a person that enables them to be aware of the world and their experiences, to think, to feel, the faculty of consciousness and thought. And it says, as the thought ran through his mind, he came to a conclusion. So I was thinking, using my mind, of course, how in different societies or different cultures, some emphasis is put on the mind and some emphasis is not really so focused on. But actually, in Eastern philosophy, the concept of the mind is one of personification, or the mind gets personified as its own thing, as its own element. In the yoga text, the mind is actually just like you have earth, wind, fire, water, air. The mind is also one of those elements. And so in this process of understanding how to gain better insight on the mind, there's different ways to characterize how the mind functions, how the mind processes. And we were talking in several series ago about when we hear something, we generalize, we distort, and then we delete.
Yes.
And so this is kind of how the mind works in one way. But from the aspect of the Eastern version, the yoga version of the mind is supposed to be in control of the senses, the sense of taste, the sense of touch, the sense of smell, these different things, and these are called the knowledge acquiring senses. So the mind is always trying to acquire information. And so we have different elements of this body that acquire information. So when we touch something, just like a child, when they touch, they grab on different things, they're developing understanding of what that particular thing, that substance they're touching. And then they can make a mental image of or how this thing feels. So if they feel something with their eyes closed, and this is
Yeah, baby, I'm flexing.
Oh,
I'm
this
flexing.
is an arm.
These pythons.
And
I'll be getting it in the morning every now and then, you know.
So we see that, you know, the mind, we can understand based off of what it's touching.
Pause.
The mind based off of what it's touching can understand, okay, this is what that is. And when we smell something, oh, that's a fire. Oh, that's a candle. Or that's...
that cake smells good. It's in the oven.
Yeah, or I think I let it sit too long. I think it's burnt, you know. And so and then or we see something. Oh, that looks like, just like and even though I've never been in the desert, I know the concept of a mirage. You know, where you're in the desert and you see what looks like an oasis or water. Mm-hmm. But this is the mind trying to understand what it's seeing. So through the senses of the eyes or vision, we can analyze or try to understand something.
I'll explain to you later. There actually is a physics behind how that works.
See, that's why you wear better glasses than I do. You're smarter. And so then when we're tasting something, we can understand. Oh, this is salty. This is bitter. This is pungent. These, this is sweet. And so the senses are always collecting data, collecting information, and it's stored in the mind. And so according to Eastern philosophy, when the mind does not have proper control over the senses, then in some cases the mind becomes the greatest enemy. Mm-hmm. And then when the mind has control over the different senses, it becomes its best friend. And we can all understand how when we're thinking about something or when we're getting ready to explain something, we forget something. We're like, my mind, I just forgot, you know? And it's almost, we think we kind of subconsciously look at it as its own thing, mm-hmm. as its own individual aspect. And even psychologists understand, like, the mind is a very difficult thing to fully understand, to wrap one's mind around.
Speak of control.
Well, speaking of control, so we're looking at this element in which, of course, we don't look at it as an element, but we understand that subconsciously that it has a mind of its own. I mean, don't we say that? We say that quite often, that my mind has a mind of its own, yes. Or my body or whatever. And so we know these things on a, subconscious level, and even some may know this on a theoretical level, but the mind is very advanced, and it's also has many components to it that, as far as Western study, we don't really have much information about in regards to how to control it. Why one should control the mind, and often we hear this negative connotation that the mind control, or brainwashing or something like that. I remember a yoga teacher, actually greater than a yoga teacher, but anyway, he was being asked by a television channel. He said, "I hear that your yoga is brainwashing these kids." And he says, "Yes, when the brain is dirty, it must be washed."
That's great.
And so we find that, of course, the understanding of brainwashing is, subliminal messages that negatively affect the way someone thinks, the way someone operates in their day-to-day life. But the idea of what was being addressed in this interview was that Western society, or most of the world has a improper understanding of how this vehicle, the body, is supposed to function. And so because of misidentification with this, we think so many things.
Yes.
And because we think so many things, some correct, some incorrect, some partially correct, some variation of truth, then we build a foundation based around this potential concept of reality. Mm-hmm. And so most people now, let me not generalize, more and more people are starting to appreciate the depth and the wisdom of Eastern philosophy when it comes to the mind, the senses, and have developing peace of mind. And so when it comes to really how to understand the mind, why not gain deeper insight from a philosophy in which there's such a vast amount of information? So that's pretty much this next 5 to 7 part series is going in depth on the nature of the mind and how a lot of us don't have such good control over the mind, and how to make it a friend or work on developing friendship. So before we jump into any more, so how does a mirage work? Because the mind sees. Oh,
you're curious about that one?
I'm curious. So,
okay. All right.
Because, you think about it, of course, like I said, I've never been in a desert before.
Gotcha.
But, there's plenty of people who have and think they've seen, that's a body of water in this distance,
right,
or some oasis.
Right.
So what's happening, Doc?
I'm glad you asked that question. So, very briefly, what's so unique about a mirage is that, as you had rightly pointed out, a desert-like environment, or even if you're in the city. It doesn't have to be just Tulsa. You could be in any major city or even non-major city. What's actually happening is that, in a nutshell, why and how it works, is that as we're looking out into the distance, right? It could be asphalt, it could be concrete, whatever the ground substance is. It could just be sand, But the heat is heating the air molecules above the ground, okay? And so what happens is, as those air molecules are becoming excited, because again, a air molecule that is cold doesn't move as much, but when it's hot, it's moving that much more, okay?
Gotcha.
And so what happens is, as those air molecules are moving around so fast, that it creates what we call warping. And so the air that is heating up, because a lot of times you may find, and I've experienced this personally, is that sometimes the heat coming from the ground could be hotter than the actual air temperature sometimes. And so that air becoming warped, when we see it from that particular angle, it gives the illusion, like we're thinking, oh, wow, that looks like water. And if you're thirsty, you might even pursue it. Yeah. Like we see in those movies or cartoons, someone sees a body of water, what appears to be a body of water in the distance, when actually it isn't a body of water. It's just that the air molecules have become so excited and they're moving around so much that the air itself had become warped. And so that's why it gives the illusion that there's water when actually it's not water. It's just physics. That's all.
That's that West Side Detroit education.
Detroit? West 7 Mile?
So but what's being seen is the eyes are unfortunately giving false information to the mind. And so we're perceiving, so many of us will run into that further into the desert, thinking, we're going to quench our thirst if we're thirsty. Yeah, and actually, we can just keep running.
And there's no water there.
There's no water.
There's no water there. So
and so when we look at how we perceive things without proper understanding of what we're actually looking at, the mind will make its own conclusion up.
Yeah.
So there needs to have some in the Eastern philosophy, the yoga text explains like higher than the mind is one's intelligence.
There we go.
And so
Bring it.
the intelligence. There's a really cool. I'll see if I can find it. There's a really cool analogy that's given about the mind and the senses, and also the intelligence. And I'll see if I can find it here. Yeah. So this is the yoga text. So really cool aspect is that you see the different color horses. So on the horses, there's little medallions or emblems that have like an ear, have eyes, have nose, have mouth, and then just the five senses. As we talked about, the five knowledge acquiring senses. And then you have the mind.
Are the driving instruments.
And then
so we call those the reins.
Yeah.
So the mind is the driving instrument.
Yeah, so the reins of, if you've ever ridden a horse, so you know kind of, you have to have some type of control of the horse. Because if not, you're just all over the place, just willy-nilly. And then, so you have the reins of the horse, which is for control.
Yeah.
And then you have this driver back there. That is considered the intelligence.
Intelligence. And then that's us in the back screaming.
I don't know if you can see that. Hold on. Let's see if I can get it. And so you have the chariot is the body.
Right.
And so our intelligence is supposed to allow us to be able to direct the mind as the mind is perceiving through the senses, what's actually being seen.
Yes.
And how to address it, because as we mentioned, this concept of the desert, the mirage, we see so many mirages on a day-to-day basis, even in the media. And sometimes of course I could say more things. I'll just call it a mirage. How there's some truth, and then there's a bunch of lies. But because the illusion is mixed with some level of truth, we think, if without the proper discernment ability, which comes from the intelligence, then without that extra variable, then whatever we see, that is what it is. That's what we believe is happening. And so with the mind, it's important to understand like what the function of it's supposed to be, and what our position is as embodied or human beings. Because oftentimes you'll hear, we're human beings having spiritual experience, but actually it's the other way around, where spiritual beings having human experience.
Yes.
And so one of the elements, which is considered higher than earth, water, fire, air, and ether, is the mind, at least from the
Eastern perspective.
Eastern perspective.
Yeah.
And go ahead. Were you gonna say something?
Oh, just clearing my throat.
Oh. So the mind has more of a important role in our day-to-day functioning of life, and we see how a lot of times the mind, when it's not properly in control, can ruin relationships, can lose jobs, can put us in compromising positions. I'll remember, and I'll be transparent. And this was probably roughly almost 20 years ago. I remember being in a relationship in which everything was going smooth, and then my partner at that time was going out of town for an extended period of time, and I didn't hear from her, right? And so I was thinking, this is weird. Didn't hear from this person, and so my mind started coming up with alternative situations. This is what's happening at 2 time, and and I was thinking, or is she hurt, or what's going on? So unfortunately, because of my lack of understanding how the mind works, lack of understanding about just so many things, being a teenager, I was 18 at the time, 18 or 19, and I did not realize what my pre-existing conditions were, and so based off of my pre-existing thought patterns, and how I looked at things, when I didn't hear from her at that time, for that period of time, I think it was maybe less than a week, I assumed, I jumped to the conclusion, she's, cheating. Had no knowledge, had no facts, no evidence. But my mind was like, yes, this is what's happening, And so based off of that, let's just say that I was not the best person to be around. And I, got angry, there's a text in the Gita, it's a yoga text, where it explains that when one is attached to something, lust develops, or strong desire. Let's just say a strong desire, and when the lust or the desire is not met, then anger happens. Frustration.
And then from frustration, then krodha, anger.
Yes. And then
from krodha, anger, then there's moha, illusion.
So, and then after that is bewilderment.
And again, you fall back into your
yes.
messed up situation. Yeah.
So the mind, after developing attachment, after developing lust, and when that desire is not met, then frustration. Why? And how many of us have been in that situation where we wanted something? Let's say it's that. What comes to mind is Black Friday, right?
Like all that shopping.
All the if you're a black shopper, Black Friday shopper. I think you're a black shopper. A Black Friday shopper. And you see, that TV is going to be on sale, super sale, super duper sale. It was originally $200, now it's $199, so I need to pick it up.
That's not a deal.
But hey, it's $199, it's not $200.
That's $1 off.
but that's what the mind sees. The mind sees, it used to be $200, now it's $199.99 or $95, and so we're like, okay, now I've never seen this price before on this television, so okay, I'm gonna go there early in the morning. I'm gonna go there tonight and put up a tent.
And that's what they used to do back in the day before the whole pandemic and everything. That Black Friday was really just a one-day deal, the day after Thanksgiving. And so Thanksgiving night, people would literally camp outside every store. Keep in mind, we're in Detroit, Michigan. Because this is Tulsa right now, but back when we were living in Detroit, it could be snowing, it could be whatever. And people would literally camp in, with their sleeping bags, their tents, and whatever they have. And it will wrap around the store. Like Toys R Us was a huge spot. Macy's and Hudson's and all these other places, JCPenney's, people were lining up camping outside the stores like you're describing.
And so people will be outside in their tent, if they're lucky, and just wait and then bum rush the store,
And then fight with the person inside.
Fight
like
with
other customers. They're fighting with each other
after they just gave thanks the day before, and then they find the last TV, and it's like there's this battle, and they're just pushing and pulling, and the TV somehow comes out the box, breaks. And so after this destruction of the television, what happens? Frustration. And then, frustration during the push and pull, the tug of war.
They're angry now.
They're angry. Now the TV's broken and they're angry. And after they're angry, they're just like bewildered. No, they're illusion.
Yeah. That's bewildered. Illusion.
Yeah, illusion. And now they're in the back of a cop car because they didn't have proper control of their mind. So Mama Swift says, as amazing and complicated as the brain is, we are able to unlearn and develop new thought patterns. And that's a really beautiful point, because as you mentioned, to learn, unlearn, and develop. Because as I mentioned, in my 20 years ago, when I was not the best version of myself today, I'm always taking opportunities for development or working on my areas of opportunity. But at that time, I didn't know I need to unlearn a habit. But later, after that relationship was over, I realized, okay, this has to change, because the way I perceived what was happening was actually not correct. It was, not even close. And because of my anger, I created a trigger for someone else in their future.
That's a deep way of putting it. That's interesting.
And I also put myself in a position in which now I could say, I messed up.
In the words of Jim Rohns, you messed up.
and yes, of course, everything happens for a reason. That there's no doubt about that. However, when we have information in which can enhance the quality of our life, why not utilize some of it? Especially if we understand that we can really make some leaps and bounds in our some changes in our life and develop a better quality of life by incorporating certain tips, tricks in doing. We can really have a more peaceful, more sustainable life. But we have to address these things that the mind perceives on a day-to-day basis and completely misunderstands what it is, and then makes its own assumption about it. And without the use of the intelligence, of our intelligence, then the mind's going to be like that image that we we just, or one's life is going to be like that image in which was depicted in the book, where the horses are running everywhere. They're running wild. And it's funny because if those of you have you been on a horse before?
Of course.
Cowboy.
A cow man, right? Who you calling boy?
So so yes, how hard, have you ever trained a horse before?
Never had to train a horse.
What was your experience like riding the horse? And what was your experience like riding a trained horse?
Trained horse, it was very easy because the horse is trained, right? So in one sense, I almost didn't have to do anything. It was almost like the cars today that have lane departure assist, where it keeps you in your lane. Like the horse kept me in my lane. The horse was intelligent. I didn't have to really work too hard because the horse is trained.
And you think
so
about,
it's enjoyable,
yeah,
you can say.
So generally on the horse, you have, your saddle, you have the reins, and, some people use spurs. I don't think spurs are necessary to ride a horse. Yeah. Maybe in the process of training the horse, maybe. But if there's certain elements that are necessary to ride the horse comfortably. And having the reins are, would you say, essential?
Well, to be very clear, having the reins are, yes, essential because you can direct the horse whichever direction that you want, and you're not necessarily fighting with the horse because the horse is trained. But in one sense, with a trained horse, you can almost say the reins are not necessarily because the horse is trained, knows where to go. So it's almost like cruise control too. But definitely if the horse is not trained, you definitely need the driving instruments, the reins. And you have to also know, I don't want to say the weak spot, but where one can actually have the most control of that horse, which is in the mouth, the bit. Just like if you have a bull, you control the bull not by putting the bit in the bull's mouth, but you have to put a ring through the septum in the nose of the bull, and you can control the bull that way. So with the horse, yes, you have to have a bit, and that's how you control the horse with the driving instruments. West side.
West side. So the idea is that depending on the body of the entity, there has to be a certain way to control this vehicle.
Yes.
And the mind is supposed to be in control, and we need the intelligence in order to help direct where the mind is going. And so oftentimes, because we're so, especially in Western society, we're so attracted to different forms of stimulation. Some of us can scroll on social media for hours. I was like that this morning. I'll be honest. I was sitting in bed, scrolling, and I was thinking, you know what? After like 20 minutes, I could be doing something better on my phone. So I started memorizing verses, and I was like, you know what? Let me not be attached or attracted to this fleeting stimulation, because that's really what it is. After we get done with one video, on to the next one. On to the next
That's
one.
what they're called shorts.
They're called
so you
shorts.
can get to the next one quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
We have a short attention span.
We have an extremely short attention span. And to be honest, I was thinking when we first started this Friday Reflections, Friday Flex, I was thinking, this an hour, that's too long for people to really pay attention. They can't pay attention this long. But then I was corrected when beginning of this year, there was a comedian by the name of Cat Williams who had a 2 or 3 hour
stand up.
that wasn't stand up. It was an interview.
Oh, okay.
It was an interview, and people watched that full 3 hour or full 2 hours because why? There was a lot of gossip. There was a lot of
stimulation.
Yes, and gossip is a form of stimulation.
There it is.
That's why you have people in different. Everybody likes gossip. That's why I remember as a kid, I used to watch Days of Our Lives. I used to watch, and I won't name characters, but it was cool. It's like, oh, that person slept with this person. Oh, that person killed this person. That person stole from this person, and then it's like, wow, I'm getting all this entertainment, this stimulation, and I'm like, oh, this is great. I can rest now. You know,
I can rest now.
because after a while we become overstimulated, and we have to rest. But because the society is being steered very, maybe inorganically, towards a direction of the train of thoughts, quick, the ability to perceive information or deduce information is becoming even more convoluted or even more difficult to do. And I'll only say this one time today.
Today. You may say it another time if you doesn't mind.
Today.
But just today.
Or excuse me, with this hour. But now there is a idea, there is a push to show that you and I can actually give birth to a baby. Not help the function of baby production, but actually you can get your baby bump here shortly.
What was that movie? Total Recall or something like that?
Was it Total Recall?
It was some crazy movie like that. Where a guy gives birth to a baby. It was something weird. Anyway.
That may have...
Total Recall had a lot of crazy stuff.
Yeah, it had a lot of crazy stuff.
It's been a minute since I've seen that movie. It's like early 90s or something.
Yeah. And so now one's ability to perceive very common information is now, I don't know, maybe, I guess I can have a baby. I guess I can produce. I don't know how it's going to come out, but, people are saying it. So therefore, I guess it's true. And so this is because there is now a lack of intelligence in society. There's not a branch of real intelligence. Then it is very difficult to walk outside and see, oh, is it raining? Maybe it's not raining. Maybe it is raining. But you're already outside. You should be able to perceive it. You could see it. But society is now directing us in such a way in which what we have known in the past as axiomatic truths are now, I don't know. I gotta question it. And now we're not. What Mama Swift says something. You guys are so engaging and the subject matter is extremely interesting. To her hilarious.
You ain't seen nothing yet.
So, but there was a post. Now, mind you, with the creation of AI, you don't really know what is actually what, which is artificial intelligence, something else's intelligence that we're taking on for our own intelligence artificially. And I don't know if this was AI or this was actually real. The artist, I won't say the artist's name, but the artist is known for doing stuff like this. But in this image that I saw earlier today, this artist was this male artist had what looked like a 7-month baby bump, and he was doing maternity photos, with this baby bump, and I was thinking, wow, amazing. And this is such, we're living in such strange times that children seeing this will think this is normal. And so many things that we're perceiving as normal. I was having a very intense discussion with my wife last year sometime, and it was addressing how now the United Nations are developing laws in which it is now okay for someone who is an adult, 18 or older, to engage relationship with someone who is not an adult, but who identifies as an adult. And so I thought to myself, wow, this is quite strange. Because before there was a clear demarcation between adult and a child. But now there's so much information being communicated, so many mirages being created, where it's like a person who at one point had full ability to differentiate between information is now like, maybe, well, I guess you're right. I guess that's true. I guess if they identify as an adult, I guess we could treat them like an adult, And I was just looking at the state of affairs, and when there is no intelligence, then this can be done easily. And so then the mind is no longer in the question, in the picture, now it's the senses. It's whatever looks good, whatever tastes good, whatever feels good.
Pause.
Whatever sounds good, then that's the only thing that matters. And so because we are in a society in which we're becoming more primitive, hungry, eat now. We're just like, food. It doesn't matter what the food is.
Just put it in your mouth and eat it.
Just put it in your mouth and eat it.
Pause.
And so there's studies done right now that shows that you can buy a Big Mac from McDonald's, and you can put it in some type of apparatus in which keeps its integrity, or like you can preserve it.
Just put it on your counter.
Just put it on your counter.
Is that test for
if it
decomposes?
Decomposes, yeah.
Just put it on your counter and just see what happens.
And so there's a person who's had their Big Mac for over 20 years. Not one single ant or bug has touched it. it still looks the same. And still, people are eating the Big Mac every day, eating the fries every day.
It will not decompose.
Despite what information is being given about the legitimacy of the texture of the ingredients, the idea is that, you know, we don't really care what is being put in our body, despite the information that we have, because there's no intelligence. The intelligence is like, my tongue wants the flavor, so therefore, because my tongue wants the flavor, then I don't care if it decomposes. It doesn't decompose. So what? I don't care if no creatures touch it except for me. So what? And then we are confused. How did this form of disease happen? How did I gain so much weight? How am I now stage 2 diabetic? Why? But no, it's because you knew, you heard, you just didn't investigate. So you let the senses, you let your sense of taste dictate what goes on in your body, because there was no intelligence used to factor in, well, maybe this may hurt me more than it helps me. And then we see this, and this was last year. So I was 38 years old when I realized that the skin is an organ. Didn't know that. The biggest organ. And so this organ is what feels. It is able to determine the texture of something. And so Preeti said something really nice. The mind can be your enemy and your best friend. We have the choice to what we put our minds.
We have a choice to what we put in our mind.
We have the choice to what we put on our mind. And so we see how if something feels good to the body, we often don't think, what is the long-term effects of it? I'll talk about briefly porn. So the idea of porn is, one, you have your mind's being stimulated by information or by what you're watching. But what's happening is, through this act, so much energy is being released, so much necessary nutrients for the body is being released, and the sacredness of this interaction is now being perverted. And it's like, so you have songs in which, like, hey, let's just do it like they do it on Discovery Channel, And so, and when I was old enough, I realized, the song, Baby, We Ain't Nothing But Animals, let's do it like they do it on Discovery Channel. And I was like, wow, they're turning something that's sacred in nature into this transactional, very artificial thing.
Yeah.
And because we're only focused on the feeling and what our eyes are perceiving, then it's like it doesn't matter. So what if now I can't have social interactions because my mind is always looking at this person? They must be good in bed, or they must have this or that, quality. Or sometimes you may even get a phone call.
Don't bring that up. Don't even bring that one up. I got an inappropriate phone call the other day, and that's it. That's it. They weren't looking for a quote. We'll just put it that way.
They were not looking for anything remotely close to a quote. They were looking for binding, but But we see that because of improper control of the mind, improper control of the authority the mind has over the senses, then we will just act animalistic. And in the yoga text, it says there's what does an animal do? Eat, sleeps, mates, and defends, or looks for shelter, or seeks shelter. And so the human being, considered mammals, if we're only eating, sleeping, mating, and searching for shelter or defending, then what makes us separate? Like what is the demarcation? Is it our bodies? Well, I mean, if that's not a sign of intelligence, just to have a human body, because there's more compassionate animals than there are human beings. So what is the difference? It's the intelligence. It's the ability to inquire. It's the ability to deduce information. It's the ability to understand what we're looking at and make a intelligent decision. And this is why so many times when we are in a position of responsibility to someone else, we will let them down every time if we do not have our intelligence under control, because we will be led by our senses. And anytime we're led by our senses, no one who depends on us can trust us. And that is a fact. Anybody that depends on us and we don't have control over what we desire to see, what we desire to taste, what we desire to feel, what we desire to hear, what we desire to smell, they cannot trust us. So if, for example, if we can't even determine, is that a fire or do I smell a nice campfire? Do I smell, or is that something in the oven that
it's burning, or is it, still good?
Right. So if something's on fire, and you don't have the ability to intelligently understand, oh, this is a fire, run, get out, or address the situation, then whoever you're in charge of, pray for them. Because, it's like you can't be depended upon.
Right.
And so similarly, if a person is just like someone who may be an alcoholic, they're as severe as alcoholism is, if they are putting the feeling that alcohol gives their body and their mind, if they're giving that precedence over the feelings of their family members, they're going to destroy their family members.
Yeah, guaranteed.
They're going to destroy their friendships. They're going to destroy any professional aspect of their career, because they don't have control of their taste, of the desire to feel a certain way. And so so often, just think about how many times have we put someone in a compromising position because we didn't have control of ourselves. I remember this was a $700 example, and I'll never forget this. So I used to play chess on my phone a lot, and now I've taken the chess app off my phone. But I was at a stop sign, and I was playing a game. I was playing a game, and I was slowly turning the corner. And as I was pressing this move, I hit the curb and my tire popped, and almost it bent something in the tire. I wasn't going fast, but I bent it, and I realized I should not be playing while I'm driving, even at a stop sign or stoplight. But it was the desire to be stimulated. It was a desire to be stimulated, my mind to be stimulated, that I, while in a extremely heavy vehicle, driving, potentially compromising someone else, because what if it wasn't a curb? What if it was somebody that just
on a bicycle,
that just came,
or another vehicle,
or another vehicle? And I thought, how immature, how irresponsible, negligent was I? But it was because I didn't have proper control of my mind and what my mind wanted at that time, which was to be stimulated by a nice chess game. And so in that process, I started looking deeply at the mind as its own thing, because theoretically I had some knowledge about it. But I thought to myself, wow, the mind is really, it really needs attention. It really needs intelligence to help direct it. Because I wanted to be stimulated through my eyes, or I wanted to play this game. And this cost me $700. And so looking at everything we do through the scope of the senses interacting with the objects, if we're able to understand, okay, yes, my body's meant to eat, or the body needs to be fed, like it's a necessity. Not everyone can be breatharians, it's a necessity. But even though it's a necessity, how do I determine what needs to go into my body? Am I letting my taste dictate it? Am I letting my desire to eat something overly salty, overly pungent? Or am I looking at, okay, this is how the body should function at its optimal state, and only feeding the body that which is optimal? But if the mind doesn't have the ability to even care what is supposed to go in, then we should not be so confused when some type of health disease comes in, when we have to amputate a leg because of diabetes, we have to do all these other things.
Heart attacks, or needing a heart bypass, or anything like that because arteries are getting clogged.
Exactly.
All that.
And this is the perspective that most of us are not willing, or this is the truth that most of us are not willing to hear, is that if we do not control the mind, we do not understand how the knowledge acquiring senses work, touch, taste, hear, sight. If we don't understand how they work, then anything that can be perceived as pleasurable to any of these senses, the mind will do without question. So there has to be intelligence. So when we are, I just used the example of eating, but through the sense of taste, if there's no control over the taste, we're going to have cavities. We're going to have, I have a sweet tooth, and I'm having to work on that, okay? So those watching know I have things I need to work on, so this is also therapeutic for myself. But because I realize, this is, my teeth are sensitive, so must be because of maybe a cavity or something. So I need to determine what is it that is ultimately best for my body and do that. Not what I think, not what my senses determine are best for my body. There was a comment, it says, self-understanding is how I determine what I consume. If I know I'm spending too much time on my phone, I know I am distracting myself from addressing something I need to address. Let's see here. Whether it is physical or an emotional task. Yeah. And that self-understanding in the sense of the yoga text is called intelligence. That ability to differentiate, the ability to determine or to decipher. And so very few people, unfortunately, in society have this intelligence because now we're being pushed to just whatever feels good, do it. My teacher often talks about this concept of, oh, you like to, if robbing people feels good, just do it, you know? There's no consequences. This is what the mind tells people. But actually, there's always consequences. And so he has a book called Hiding Unnatural Happiness in which he pokes or holds or jabs at this philosophy of those who think if it feels good, do it. Don't question it. And now we're seeing how not questioning what feels good is what kind of impact it's making on the youth. The effects that is developing in our age and the results of our parents, you know? So we have to wrap up. But were you going to say?
There was a lot of things I was going to say.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's all good, you're good. I
Okay.
understand. I don't want to hold you up either. So what I was going to mention was in regards to, and again, just to, like a yo-yo, kind of reel it back in and bring it back. So as you pointed out, we have the 5 senses for acquiring knowledge. Taste, touch, smell, seeing.
Sight.
Seeing, yes, the seeing.
Taste, touch, smell, seeing.
Eating, steam, So taste, touch, smell,
hearing.
Hearing, yeah, that's what I forgot.
Yes.
I forgot hearing, so hearing and so forth. So we're acquiring senses. So we have knowledge acquiring senses, okay? That information is coming into the mind. Or actually, let me be a little more clear. So we have the brain as well, because we have a nervous system, the material body, right? So we have the nervous system that all goes to the brain. And of course, obviously, if you were to cut open someone's brain, you do not see, you know, what they enjoy, their likes, dislikes, and so forth, right? So a lot of things are obviously kind of stored, we could say, in the brain, yes, as like chemical reactions, but also in the mind, right? And so the mind can sometimes be described as almost like an interface, like a computer screen, right? Or maybe we're in a room, like let's say you're locked in a building, you're locked in a room, and you don't know what's going on outside. And so just like someone may have a doorbell with a camera on it, and you don't know who's on the other side of the door, but it shows up on your cell phone or some type of device so you can see or be able to perceive what is taking place on the other side of the door outside, right? So sometimes the mind is sometimes like an instrument where it allows us to perceive what's going on. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's telling us the truth, but it allows us to see or get some perception of what's taking place based off of what information is coming in through the senses, okay? So just very briefly, I'll mention this. I think in our earlier sessions, I mentioned about a basketball team where in the 1960s where some of the basketball players were allowed to practice their free throws in the gymnasium itself, okay? They're actually getting it in. So that's a group A. Group B was not allowed to go to the gymnasium to practice their free throws, but in their room, their dorm room, only in their mind, were they allowed to practice their free throws, okay? Or just visualize themselves practicing free throws. And then group C was not allowed to visualize themselves practicing their free throws, nor were they allowed to go into the gymnasium to practice free throws. And so the result of this experiment was that Group B, which were those students or actual players on the basketball team, they're actually on the basketball team. Those basketball players that only practice their free throws in their mind's eye, you can say, and then those basketball players that are actually physically in the gymnasium practicing their free throws, they both made progress in their free throws, basically equal. And so the conclusion beyond that little detail of that free throw practice was that the mind cannot differentiate between what is real and not real. It's just presenting like a TV screen or a monitor. It's just presenting what is being perceived according to the senses, but it cannot differentiate. And we see this in the NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Program. They actually give that example of the basketball players, and they make that conclusion as well. They point that out that, again, the mind cannot distinguish between what is real and not real. So the intelligence, we can acquire knowledge through our senses, and that can help us build some intelligence, you know, in terms of what we like, what we do not like, etc. And not to go too deep into this because it'll be obviously a more deeper conversation that can be taking place at another time. But intelligence can come from a higher source, you know, like you can have spiritual knowledge, spiritual wisdom, like that. But you also can have intelligence coming from, let's say we go to a university and we learn different things from a teacher, right? And then we learn from them or from our parents, right? Someone who has some experience in things. And so we can learn from someone else who has some wisdom, some experience, some intelligence, what is right, what is wrong. What, like for example, what is safe to eat? Like you gave example of food, like this is nourishing for you, or food items that have been through whatever chemical process or what have you like that, that could cause harm to our bodies and how they function and so forth. It could have carcinogenic repercussions, right? Like smoking cigarettes. Someone may say, well, hey, nothing wrong with smoking cigarettes. The Marlboro Man is perfectly fine and dandy. But then the Marlboro Man also figured out later on that he's dying from emphysema or black lung disease or whatever it may be. So we receive intelligence in terms of being able to know right and wrong, or to be able to discern with intelligence. And so in the yoga text, one thing that is really unique that is pointed out, of course, keep in mind you have the senses or knowledge acquiring senses, you have the mind, the driving instrument, you have intelligence. And so Arjuna asks Krishna, what causes an individual to perform an abominable act as if by force? And Krishna explains to Arjuna, and this is coming out of Bhagavad Gita, that it is lust only, Arjuna. And this enemy of lust is seated within the senses, the mind, and the intelligence. And so even if one may have intelligence, but if the intelligence is not good or is not coming from a credible source. We've talked about something like that in our early sessions, right? In terms of negative thoughts and so forth. If we're getting bad information from, again, not a credible source, and our perception, our mind, and what we're thinking is real, or shall I say, we're not able to make proper discernment in terms of what is real and not real, but we're thinking that this information is going to give us the pleasure or satisfaction or proper stimulation that we're seeking, and we make that poor decision to go in that specific direction, and then it bites us in the butt, and then we feel frustration like you were pointing out in that fashion. And so when it comes to intelligence, even if we're not able to trust our own, we still have to know how to ask the right questions so that we can strengthen and fortify and build our intelligence. And, of course, tapping into a credible wealth of knowledge and so forth. So that way we can make the best decisions and use our intelligence and proper discernment as we're going forward in life. So I'll just wrap it up and keep all that simple in that way, but to be continued.
Yes, yes. All right, thank you all so much for your time, and hopefully you all liked it. And please, if you liked it, share it. So till next time,
Keep it flexing, baby.
and moisturized.
And moisturize.